Welcome everyone. We'll be getting started in about 1 minute. Just waiting for folks to join the webinar. Again, welcome to those of you who are joining. We'll give folks about 30 more seconds to join in the session, and then we'll get started. Our topic is Tales from the Road, the New Sales Journey. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our virtual happy half hour for June 19th. Cannot believe it is June already. As I mentioned just a second ago, our topic is Tales from the Road, the New Sales Journey. I am Michelle Richardson of the Brooks Group's Sales Performance Research Center, and I am joined by Russ Scherer, our Director of Facilitation and Coaching. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you, Michelle. Good to be with everyone again. The virtual happy half hour has been something that we have been involved with over these last 10, 12, 13, 14 weeks. I lose count. But we appreciate you joining us. Our goal is always to give you information that's up to date in terms of what you need. And the topic today is timely because we're going to be talking about what it means to get on the road again and what stories people are bringing back. We are sponsored, as we are every week, by the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum, this time Forum 2.0. The change and transition from our time of quarantine to our time of the next normal or new normal is occurring. And so we are reformulating the forum in that stead. They're now going to be every 6 weeks as opposed to every week. They're going to be for 2 hours at a time, still focused on that peer-to-peer connection, but also some chance to bring in some more best practices that we, the Brooks Group, have learned over 40 years. And that was really at the request of the forum people. If you've been curious but just haven't signed up yet, you can still get in on the forums. We're doing a set of premier showcases. In other words, what does it look like? The next ones will be June 26th. Just email us at forum@thebrooksgroup.com. Producer Rich will put it up there in the chat window. And that'll give us a chance to make sure that you get an invitation, and we'd love to see you as a part of that. So today, what are we going to cover? We're really going to look at the data you gave us about the instructions you're giving to your team, putting them back on the road, what kind of efficiency they've got. What does it mean not to just put them out on a circle again in terms of calling on customers locally, but what about when you hit the road to spend the night? What does that look like? And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the best practices and the needs that these road warriors have as they go back on the road as we finish up this time of COVID. But first, as always, let's take a look at what you told us that you're doing in terms of dealing with this time and with your teams. Michelle?
Thank you, Russ. So let's take a look at when your teams will be traveling. And again, we put this out as a survey. We thank everyone that responded. The first thing that we asked was when are teams going out on single day trips? Seems to be a relatively low risk. 53% of you have teams on the road right now for day trips already out there. Another 30% will have teams out on the road between now and the end of July, so really through the summer. Only 6% of you are waiting to see kind of what the new virus cases are going to be doing. And obviously we know that's a very hot topic right now, as there are some surges in certain parts of the US. For overnight trips though, our respondents are a little bit more risk averse. They're a little more cautious. 41% of you are making overnight trips already. 30% now, between now and the end of July, you're planning to send your teams out. But 18% of you are weighing the new virus cases. So 3 times as many are kind of taking a wait and see attitude on those overnight trips. But interestingly enough, I want to contrast this data with what the experts, the medical experts, are saying. So earlier in June, the New York Times published a survey of epidemiologists, so those folks that are the infectious disease specialists, asking when they would personally resume certain activities. 56% of them said that they would travel overnight within driving distance sometime this summer. However, 44% said they would travel by airplane, but they're going to wait 3 to 12 months to do so. 40% said in that same time frame they'd consider getting back on a subway or bus, and 56% said that would be the time frame for dining in a restaurant. It will take a year or more for 52% of those epidemiologists to routinely stop wearing their face coverings, and 42% said it would take a year before they would even shake hands with a friend. So definitely a more cautious attitude on the part of the medical experts. So we asked what your team is telling us about, or telling you about their experience on the road. So teams have been back on the road at least a couple of weeks. Some of you have been out more than a month. So what are they reporting back? So first, what we're hearing is there's no coffee or food available in hotels. In some cases, there's no housekeeping. So I personally would probably avoid that hotel in the future. You know, there are a few teams that aren't even traveling yet. Some of you are just now getting back out. One person said that everyone was looking at their salespeople as if they're contagious. And the salesperson kind of just has to smile and be pleasant through the kind of the awkward looks. Salespeople are wearing their PPE. They're keeping a social distance, even when their customers are not asking them to. Interestingly enough, salespeople are offering dinner outings with their customers, but most customers are still saying no. One that I thought was particularly interesting, a sales leader indicated that their meetings are becoming more purposeful. So you have to make the most of the time that you have because it's harder to get. And many of you are still using Zoom or virtual methods for those really hard to reach clients or people that are in more remote or harder to get to locations. I was talking with a sales leader earlier this week. He has had his team back out on the road for a week or so. He said that larger corporations tend to have more safety protocols and more security, more rules and regulations in place in terms of being able to get on site to visit, whereas the small businesses are a lot more flexible so far in terms of being able to meet face-to-face. So
Michelle, one of the things I'm hearing is that many of the corporations and the companies are changing their rules periodically. So we've had cases where sales reps have had meetings booked, they've had them confirmed, they've showed up at the building, and there's a new requirement in place or something has changed. And so it's a good reminder that we've always got to be calling and reconfirming our meetings, even the day of now. Because you'd hate to take the trip out there to someplace and then be refused entrance.
You know, that is a great point. And, you know, one of the tenets of impact selling that we teach is confirm your appointments. And certainly that is even more important right now. And you bring up an interesting point about navigating different security procedures and safety protocols, because that is an ongoing issue. It's something we've been talking about for a while, and it's showing up in our survey. So we asked, what kind of issues are your teams still seeing? And there were two primary ones that seem to be causing the most problems. One being navigating those different procedures at each new site. And as you mentioned, those can be changing even on a day-to-day basis. The biggest one is customers and prospects just being unwilling to set face-to-face appointments right now. So we've said this before, but just because your salespeople are excited to get back out on the road, it does not mean that the customers are always excited to see them, or they just may not be able to see your sales teams because of protocols that are in place from their companies. We are not having too much difficulty finding businesses open in order to get food, to buy gas. It's showing up a little bit, but that seems to be fairly easy. There's less social distancing and fewer safety protocols than sales team members may be comfortable with. That's an even split. So 40% of you are saying, yes, there's less safety than I'm comfortable with. Another 40% of you are saying, nope, that's fine. So that was a pretty even distribution. And then Russ, to your point, the inability to access customers and prospects' facilities, even with an appointment, is somewhat split. For the most part, people are able to get on site, but there are still those that even with the appointment, they just can't get in.
I think that's one of the dynamics that's happening right now is that things are changing so quickly. I did a lot of research for this webinar last week, and then in refreshing it the middle of this week and towards the end, there's just new things that are happening all the time. And so I think we've got to just stay on top of that. This data was taken over the last 2 weeks, but it may look different if we take it in the last 2 days versus, early last week.
Exactly. And I think it also, again, speaks to that importance of communication, staying in touch with your customers before you set out, and then knowing that you've got to have a level of agility and adaptability in working with your customers, because once you hit the road, something still may change. And this brings us to talking about efficiency of selling. So, anecdotally, we know that teams are having varying degrees of success getting back out in front of customers, and we just talked about that. And our respondents reported some selling efficiency issues in this reopening phase. However, if you consider the biggest issue that we just talked about, which was customers unwilling to set appointments with salespeople, if you also consider what we were talking about in terms of setting appointments and then not being able to keep them once you get there, these numbers are not super surprising. 36% report that their teams are less than 50% efficient when compared to the end of 2019. So they've lost half of their efficiency, if not more. 29% believe their teams are between 50 and 75% efficient, and another 29% believe teams are 75 to 100% efficient. So only 6% believe that their sales teams are more efficient now than they were at the end of 2019. But what I'm also hearing is, if you consider this as levels of efficiency right now in reopening as they're trying to get back out on the road, sales leaders are also telling us that their teams are more efficient when they're using virtual means, and something to really think about in that rush to get back out in front of clients. I was speaking with a client a couple of weeks ago in the financial services industry, and they were saying that they estimate that their team had 20% more selling time by going virtual. So again, something to think about when you are considering getting your teams back out on the road, having them meet face-to-face. Is there a better balance in selling through virtual means or trying to connect that way as well?
An interesting data point, Michelle. This week's Smart Brief sales management newsletter did a survey. So not necessarily scientific, it's the readers of that, but a few hundred respondents. And they asked, would you rather be selling face-to-face or would you rather sell virtually? 82% of the respondents said they'd rather be face-to-face. So the bias, and we're hearing this from our clients as well, so one of our clients told me his team is chomping at the bit to get out and get back face-to-face with people, but it may not always be the best way to sell, as you just mentioned. So that's got to be factored in as you think about efficiency. And as we mentioned at the top of the webinar, we are sponsored by the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum. The forum is a group of small, maybe 8-10 people who, as we go through this phase to 2.0, we were asked to kind of group people in similar industries, those that have kind of common sales structures and maybe common go-to-market strategies, for them to get the chance to talk and to learn kind of what each other are doing. This week, some of the hot topics were KPIs and quotas. What are happening and how are people thinking through what those should look like for the rest of 2020, as well as lead generation, some of the challenges Michelle just spoke about. So if you'd like to be a part of one of those teams that's focused on sales managers and sales leaders, we would love to have you. As I mentioned, we're going to do some showcases or some demonstrations, if you will, of what it's going to look like on June 26th, next Friday. So if you send an email to forum@thebrooksgroup.com, we'll make sure you get an invitation and can see what's happening. We are seeing new interest, not just from the people who've been involved for a while, but new interest all the way along, because this, whatever comes next, whatever we call this phase we're in, is going to be as much of a management challenge as the quarantine ever was. Michelle?
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention we are doing a forum showcase specifically for human resource and talent development professionals. So we will have forums dedicated to these roles as well as the sales leaders. And it's an opportunity for folks who are responsible for recruiting and training salespeople and other customer-facing team members to come together, network, engage, and develop professionally. So there will be a separate forum showcase for human resources, learning and talent development professionals. That one, I believe, is on July 15th. Again, if you're interested in that specific forum, email forum@thebrooksgroup.com. And we also mentioned, just in this previous slide, we talked about selling virtually and how you can be more efficient and perhaps more effective selling that way. And to help your teams in that regard, our next Selling at Social Distance workshop will be on July 9th. And we will be talking about virtual tactics to convince prospects and manage objections. So this is a 90-minute workshop covering how to reduce resistance, overcome objections, and how to deliver price in a virtual environment. So if you're interested in participating in that 90-minute workshop, again, that is July 9th. It is at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Email us at webinar@thebrooksgroup.com. And I believe Rich will post that in the chat as well.
And if you've got a question about the list of forums or anything like that, you can, again, send an email to that forum at thebrooksgroup.com. We'll get back to you with the information that lines up with your particular area of interest in sales strategy.
Excellent, thank you. And I want to put one more message out to our participants. As we continue to do these happy half hours, we are looking to make sure that our topics are relevant to our audience, that we are covering what you are experiencing right now in the moment. One of the things that we're hearing about is that companies now are really looking to generate revenue, finish 2020 strong. And so if you have any particular challenges or topics with that regard in particular that you'd like us to address in future Happy Half Hours, please chat those to us. Let us know in the chat box any topics that you would like to learn more about, and we will consider those for future webinars. Again, we are looking to bring you the information you need in the most timely manner possible.
Right. Thanks, Michelle. Let's talk about what life is like on the road. All of us want it to be normal again. And this week I was on a road trip from California to Louisiana. And I can tell you that it's normal, but it's anything but normal. And things are changing so rapidly. Yesterday, for example, California mandated the use of masks for anyone who are outside. I read that New York is considering a decision to quarantine all travelers from Florida and one other state that's seeing a lot of outbreaks. So this is a crazy time if you're going to start putting your salespeople on the road, even inside of a state, or especially if you're going to go interstate and start doing some calls. So you need to stay up to date. California is threatening misdemeanor tickets for anyone not wearing a mask that would include a financial fine. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't, but highly likely if you've got out-of-state plates, you're going to get ticketed before somebody with in-state plates. Let's just put it that way. So what do we need to know? First of all, CDC continues to advise that everyone stay home unless it's for essential travel. Now we know that our businesses need salespeople on the road, so we are essential. But just so you know that, PPE is important. Masks, sanitizers, 6-foot distance. There has been a lot of ink come out, and I've done a lot of research myself. They continue to say that washing your hands or using hand sanitizer, wearing a mask, and staying 6 feet apart is the best way to slow the spread and to get this thing behind us as opposed to in front of us. Some of the things that I read in going through this, one, we need to make sure that our cars are ready. We typically think that, yep, I've serviced it, it's in good shape. But a lot of cars have been parked for a few months, batteries may be weaker. So it's recommended that before you start out on your first long sort of overnight trip, you make sure that you have had the car checked and you're not looking for a breakdown. I can tell you from my trip that gas stations were plentiful. We bought a package of disposable gloves, so every time I had to handle a pump or punch in a credit card number, I didn't have to worry about a high-touch surface. And that's really the key thing, is watch for high-touch surfaces. I did not see consistency in terms of the use of masks. We stopped at a gas station in Houston. Every single person in that gas station was filling up, had a mask on. We stopped at a Dairy Queen in a smaller town in Texas. Masks were they were there. A couple of people were wearing them, but most people weren't. There was a firefighting, I think it's called a firefighting crew that was coming back from a fire. All fairly young men, probably in their early 20s, not a mask to be seen. One of the recommendations that was made, and again, these are just things that we've read and are advising people on, you can make the decision if it's important, is a personal restroom kit. If you need a place to go on the road, there may not always be a clean restroom. And so it's recommended that you pack something that's got hand sanitizer, maybe a toilet seat cover, soap, paper towels, whatever you think you're going to need. Some of the stops we saw, they're doing a better job with bathrooms than you would typically see when you're traveling. Others look like they hadn't changed at all. So we all take our chances, I guess. Calling ahead is a good idea. Websites, we found that there was plenty of gas available, but the restaurants and rest areas particularly were affected. Their hours were affected in terms of what they were open. And we almost got caught in West Texas, low on gas and thinking that we would find a station, and there just wasn't one. So we had to route through a small town called Iran, Texas. So if you've ever been to Iran in Texas, now I have too. Plenty of food out on the road, lots of drive-through. There is people advertising curbside. We brought a lot of our food, a lot of sandwiches and stuff, so we could just keep driving because we had a long way to go. And again, be sure to wipe down the gas pumps before use because they're a high-touch service. Next, I call this next kind of section Peter, Paul, and COVID. It's kind of a nod to Peter, Paul, and Mary's leaving on a jet plane. This is one of the areas that's changing very rapidly. May 31st, the data said that the average flight in the US had 54 passengers. Updated data from June 11th, that had grown to 57 passengers. So 3 passengers isn't a big deal. But it was the first day that TSA had screened over 500,000 air travelers since this began. Now, typical is about 1.8 to 2.1 million air passengers a day in the US. So that still says we're flying about 25% capacity. But some changes are there. They're allowing more hand sanitizer. You can take in more liquid, that is, than just the 3.5 ounces. Some best practices I've seen recommended: wear sunglasses when you're in the air. That'll keep you from touching your face. Be very careful when you're deplaning. The recommendations are book a window seat and then wait until the plane is mostly empty before you get up and get off, because people still jump up and try and crowd out the exits. Bring on board your own food and beverage, because some airlines are limiting those. It's also a best practice probably to drive yourself to the airport and not use either a car service or Uber if you're looking for ways to stay the safest. One thing that's changed this week is that now the major airlines are mandating that you wear a mask on board. They've had for a while, you need a mask to get on board, but now you've got to keep it on. United, Delta, American, JetBlue, Southwest. If for some reason you decide you want to push and take your mask off when you are on the flight, you will receive and can receive a temporary ban from that airline. So you could be bounced for the next 60 days or something. There are some caveats around that. If you are hearing impaired and you're a lip reader, I can't remember what the other ones are, but check, because it's not universal, but it's pretty broad. And then the last one, this comes from a line out of, I think it's McKinsey, which is hello plexiglass, goodbye buffets, gyms, and mini bars. That's what we're going to lose when we go into airport or hotels. Hotels tend to be running about 50% capacity this time over last year. I read a review just before we came on that Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and Seattle all had vacancy rates that were somewhere between 50 and 75% lower than 12 months ago. And it sits you back. I think it was Seattle that was 75% lower. 75% less people traveling into Seattle is just incredible. Best thing you can do if you're looking for a hotel, ask about their cleaning protocols. What do they do to clean a room? What don't they do? How often do they put somebody in the room? where do they clean? One of the questions I had never thought about was, do they have housekeeping either wear gloves or change their gloves as they make the bed? And because one of the things we're seeing is that this disease is most transferable if you're in its presence for a long period of time. And while surfaces is a low risk way to get it, conceivably if someone had coughed on your pillow the night before when they were making up the room, it could be a problem. The other things we're hearing about hotels, you can ask how long has it been since this room was occupied. Some of the hotels I read about are using fog disinfectants, which will kill the virus on a surface up to 90 days. Many hotels are rethinking or getting rid of valet parking or free hotel shuttles. So if you're coming from the airport. But there's as many strategies on this as there are people. The USA Today yesterday ran an article on what 8 different travelers are doing. And they had ideas from walking in and throwing the bedspread on the floor and not touching it anymore to bringing your own pillows. There is a wand that someone promoted. It's for sale on Amazon. It's a UV wand. Then you go look and it's highly recommended that you don't, because your ability to kill it in 5 quick passes is very limited. So you set your own strategies. There's lots of tools. Those high touch areas are always the big ones. Remote control, knobs in the bathrooms and doors. The article said hotel phones, but I'm thinking, when's the last time I used a hotel phone? They're also saying take the stairs, not the elevator, so you don't have to push buttons. Some people are saying smaller hotels where you run into fewer people are good. Other people say no, larger hotels where they have better cleaning protocols in place. We had some friends who went out to a hotel, spent the night. There was no breakfast in the morning. You picked up a box and took it back to your room. That was your continental buffet breakfast. And if you're an Airbnb person, that's also a good option. Fewer people to interact with if you go to Airbnb, and they have implemented very strict cleaning requirements. So as long as the property is maintaining those, that might be an option. And then if you're looking for just some fun some night, you can Google COVID remedies online and see what people come up with. Finally, as we move into this, what else do the road warriors need besides just sort of the things about cars and hotels and planes? And that is, number one, to prepare, we really recommend that your organization think about an on-the-road playbook. Most of you had a playbook that you created before you came back into your offices, because this is a new situation and you need to give guidance. I'm in the process right now of building one for my team, the facilitators who go out, and we're going to cover questions like, what happens if you're sick the day after a meeting? Or what happens if you show up for a meeting and the meeting room is too small for the number of people who are there? We really believe you should give some guidance to your team so that they have an idea of the best way to handle that. Next thing is, once you kind of set that up, have them start thinking about their year. So this is really about how do you get to your biggest number possible in 2020. Start at the end of the year and work your way backwards. How much of your business is secure and base? How much of it is at risk? How much new business do you need to find? And what segments are you going to find that in? This planning exercise right now can really help set some directions for them as they begin to go out on the road. As I said earlier, Smart Brief survey said 80-something% of salespeople want to sell face-to-face. And so there's going to be an urgency to move, and you need to work with them on an urgency to plan before they move. And then in terms of the other things, we're hearing from HR experts that a lot of companies are breaking the performance review cycle with the salary increase cycle. Now, I've always been a person who believes that your performance review should never be a surprise. Managers should be sharing how they're doing year in and year out. But right now is a time where people still need that feedback. They need to be told what are they doing well and what are they not doing well. The Society of Human Resource Managers did a survey recently. They came back and said 32% of companies are currently delaying increases because it's unclear financially what's going to lie ahead of them. So that might be something else to consider. John Maxwell says that uncertainty is more stressful than bad news. We all know that. If we think we're going to miss a plane, we're more stressed than if we know the plane's been canceled and we know we've got to just rebook and figure out where to go. So recognize your people are still going to be concerned and in crisis, even though they want it to be normal. We have an exercise we call Triple E. Check on their energy, check on their engagement, and their enthusiasm. You need all of those things to be there. They may be running on adrenaline. It may be that I'm so amped up from being quarantined that I just want to get out there in the worst way. Don't let it be the worst way. As managers, work with them to help them go. We saw the notes about efficiency. You need your team being as successful as they can. And then finally, another John Maxwellism, respect is gained on difficult ground. And it was recommended, I think this is a great question. If you're stressed, if you're thinking about your team, ask the question, would you want to work for you right now? And let's work on being the kind of managers that people really want to work on or work for and work with. I worked for a company one time where they had just a hugely dysfunctional sales team. This was before I got there, but they were telling stories of what used to happen at the end of a year. One fairly weak sales rep who had missed his number went in and demanded his bonus from a weak sales manager. And the weak sales manager caved and gave him that bonus. And as a result, the rest of the team was furious. So as you go through and think about resetting targets or quotas or whatever it's going to be for the rest of the year, the one key thing you need to do is be clear and consistent and communicate. People all want to be treated fairly. They don't necessarily all expect the same treatment, but they want to be treated fairly. So that's a great way to ask that question. Would you want to work for you? Am I treating the people who work for me fairly? So that's what we're seeing from people on the road. We're willing to take questions, give you our perspective or data that we've seen. You can chat those or you can drop them in Q&A. The other thing that Michelle mentioned is we'd love to know what other topics are on your mind that you'd like to talk about. These webinars are designed to give you sort of up-to-the-date information in terms of a real-time need you've got, and we'd like to keep them relevant as we start to open up and get back out on the road. So any questions or anything you'd like to know, chat it or give it through Q&A.
While we're waiting for questions to come in, we have a review of the immediate best practices to implement. And just a reminder, if you're interested in signing up for the virtual workshop on tactics to convince prospects and manage objections, be sure to email webinar@thebrooksgroup, and that's on July 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, let me hit the best practices. We said, be sure that travel is smart and effective. So keep your PPE in place, plan those trips a little bit more, both from what you're physically going to do and what it's going to take to be successful from a business perspective on them. Plane trips looks like it's going to be later. There are people flying. I talked to someone who did, and he said it wasn't a lot of fun, but it gets you there, and he came back safe. Understand your hotel and what their cleaning protocols are. And then you're being graded by your team, so make sure there's clear guidelines, work to remove uncertainty, and empathy remains your friend. The 3 E's, we have a question: energy, enthusiasm, and engagement. Energy is kind of how much they bring of themselves. Enthusiasm is energy is how much they themselves, how well they're feeling about their role. Enthusiasm is how much gusto they bring to the job. And engagement is how much they're really interacting and going through things. Sales process management in this new reality. You know, I can answer that question, but it's going to change because I think every week there's something new. So probably the most important new factor is just you've got to be agile. Just before we went on today, Apple announced that they were closing some of their stores in areas that were hard hit. And I think we're going to see this idea of targeted shutdowns in areas where you're seeing the rates increase. And so being able to flex and move and bounce around are going to be key to your plans. And it may be that part of the country is wide open and going strong, and another part is shut down. So I think that's really the key factor is stay agile, and then realize the people part of this matters as much or more than ever because your people are in stressful situations and they may be working against their own best interests sometimes to go out. We had another question about companies adjusting quotas. Good question. I've been doing some research on that, and I don't know that I have all the answers around it. It looks like, from what I've seen, the most recent data is still less than 50% have adjusted quotas. Now, more than the data I said, I think like 42 or 43% have adjusted quotas. The rest of the people are saying changing either their compensation based on key performance indicators. They're talking about year-end bonuses based on where people end up. It's hard to change a quota if you don't know what the new conditions are going to be. And so nobody really wants to change a quota and then have something be different a month from now and have to change it again. So I don't know that people have landed on a best practice. I've seen companies who are adamant that they have to change as quickly as possible, others that haven't. The earning potential of your people is very important. And so this is a thing to think about. Your industry, how predictable is it? How solid is your business? If I was a sales manager right now looking at my business, I would ask myself, how much of what is that either I can recognize or is on the backlog, am I going to be able to ship with high confidence the rest of the year? Is that 50% of what I need, or is it 15% of what I need? And then I'd sit with my managers and really do a good scrub down of where are we going to be. And that's probably what I would use to set my basis in terms of quotas. And you're going to have to fight both the feeling of pessimism or the feeling of optimism, but what's just the best thing you can do? I always say that in sales management, what our leadership looks to us for is predictability. Yes, they want the number. Yes, they want it to be bigger than the quota they gave us. But the biggest thing they want is how predictable can we be when we say we're going to hit a number? And now is a good time for you to work with your managers to do that. And I think we actually have a strategic account management open seminar coming up. It's on our website, where you can learn more about the processes and tools to be able to look at your territories and your key accounts to map that kind of information. All right. With no other questions? Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think that was the last question. I don't see any more that have come in. Our next session will be July 10th. So that's actually 3 weeks from today. We'll be skipping July 3rd in observance of the Independence Day holiday. So we will see you again on July 10th.
All right, everybody, take care out there, and we'll see you on the 10th.
Thank you.